I, as well as other commissioners, have been approached of late by various media outlets, by citizens, even by other commissioners, to do a number of things. One of which is to make statements, another was to grant interviews, and then another was to call a special or emergency meeting. As a lifelong resident of Albuquerque, I understand the concern of the citizenry, and I struggled with the notion of not only calling a special meeting, but talking to the media in an effort to address things head on. However, as a member of the Police Oversight Commission, I understand and appreciate the need for following a calm and reasonable path and reaching the POC's goal of rendering a fair and impartial review of the facts, once we have them, all while following the conventions set forth in our rules. These rules govern how and when the POC reviews officer-involved shootings, and each of us has agreed to follow these rules. By us attempting to do things we're not empowered to do, we risk derailing the established process. Additionally, by venturing out of our lane and into any of these other potential courses of action, we risk putting ourselves in a position where we make a comment, a statement, or give off even the perception that we have prematurely formulated an opinion one way or the other. Doing that right out of the gate, that renders us biased and precludes us from hearing the case when it is presented to us. How does that help? I submit to you that that does not help. Ms. Hammer has issued a letter to the Chief Administrative Officer offering to do her best in completing her review of the Boyd case in as timely a manner as possible, when she has all of the evidence and all the information she needs. This will take some time, but anything less would not afford the case the thorough review it is due. As commissioners, we too must wait not only for the administrative investigation to be complete, but for the IROs as well. But by following our established procedures, we ensure that we are being fair and reasonable, conducting an impartial review to everyone involved. Once we have all the information, we'll then commit to that fair and impartial review. These are our rules. Is there room for improvement? Certainly. Is there anything to be gained by us taking it upon ourselves to change the rules now, or even to bend them just a little? I don't think so. Rather, I encourage the citizens, the media, and my fellow commissioners to let the investigation occur. Let the review of the investigation occur, and let the process proceed as established. If at some point the rules governing these procedures change, it's my hope that the commissioners in place at that time will adhere to those rules, just as it should be the hope of all that each of us follows the rules in place today. That's my statement. Before we go into public comment, I do have a couple other things to say. Again, I wanted to thank everybody for coming tonight. Your participation in this process is very important. Your involvement in this forum and others is a testament to your concern for our city, and we appreciate your passion and share in your concerns as we move forward. With that in mind, we have opened up this portion of tonight's meeting to public comment. A couple rules. First, you have to sign up. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, let me just finish this and then. Actually, no, let me take that back. I think Ms. Hammer, I think Major Barker's intent of having your portion move forward, so you could kind of say your part on the process. So, take a minute to do that.
Robin Hammer, Independent Review Officer. The IRO report typically comes at the end of the meeting, but we moved it up today prior to public comment so the public may have a better understanding of the process of what is involved in the Independent Review Officer's independent review, as it says, of officer-involved shootings. I understand that the Independent Review Officer's review of the Albuquerque Police Department action surrounding the death of John Boyd on March the 16th, 2014 is one of high importance to the citizens of Albuquerque. I have made the review of this case a top priority within my office. Unfortunately, when I begin a review of that officer-involved shooting, and any officer-involved shooting, is much out of my control. Under current city law, I am tasked with making a fair, impartial, and thorough review of all Albuquerque Police Department officer-involved shootings to determine if APD personnel followed the standard operating procedures in place at the time of the shooting. In order to come to my conclusions, I reviewed both the criminal investigation completed by the multi-jurisdictional officer-involved shooting task force which is staffed by the Albuquerque Police Department, the New Mexico State Police, and the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department, and the District Attorney's Office, and as well as the administrative investigation completed by the Albuquerque Police Department Internal Affairs Division. It typically takes several weeks and sometimes months for both of these investigations to be completed. These investigations must be fully completed prior to my independent review. Once I have received copies of the completed criminal and investigative investigations in the John Boyd matter, I will begin my independent review. I understand that completing my independent review of this matter is of high importance. I will do my best to ensure that the independent review is completed with deliberate speed after I have all the evidence and information I need to complete this important task. With respect to the regular pedestrian part of the independent review office report, I've continued my community outreach, speaking to coalition meetings for District 7 and District 4 in the last month, and have plans to speak to a couple more in the next month or so. We received 26 complaints in the past month. We closed 26 cases last month as well. The job well done report was not issued at this time because it was affected by the computer problems that the city experienced earlier in the last week or so. But I will, at the next meeting, give 2 months worth of job well done reports at that time.
Any questions from Ms. Hammer?
Ms. Hammer, just to make it clear for the record, I agree that you would independently review the investigation, but is it not true that under the ordinance you do not have authority to independently investigate an officer-involved shooting? You only have the power to monitor such a shooting. It's investigated by the Internal Affairs Unit of the APD and the Homicide Squad of the APD.
I conduct an investigation in that I go to the scene of every single officer involved in shooting and make an observation of the scene and the investigation that's there. So to that extent to it.
That's your monitoring function. I mean,
you can call it whatever you want. I observe the scene firsthand.
You don't interview witnesses or look for witnesses or canvass for witnesses, or is that correct?
That's correct. I do not canvass any witness.
Nor interview witnesses.
Nor do I interview witnesses at the scene at the time, no.
Thank you.
Commissioner Foster.
Hi, Earl. It is my understanding as a... Is it on? Can you hear me now? It's my understanding as this committee, we are responsible for only looking at the APD's SOP and whether that officer violates the SOP or does not violate the SOP. And your investigation is in accordance with that SOP only.
With all of SOPs, I review whether or not the officers involved follow the standard operating procedures in place at the time that the shooting occurred. That's correct. Other agencies make determinations with respect to criminal liability and civil liability.
Thank you.
Anything else? Mr. Siegel.
As a point of clarification, it is one of the powers and duties of the Commission, not the IRO, to audit and monitor all investigations and/or police shootings under investigation by APD's Internal Affairs. It would be up to us if we chose to exercise that power, which we never have in the 2 years that I've served on this commission, to ask for such information and ask for presentation as would constitute monitoring to satisfy ourselves. That's my best understanding. It would be up to us as a commission, not up to IRO Hammer. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Shine.
Let me clarify that for Commissioner Siegel. On the long-term planning committee, we've in fact tried to exercise that authority by asking for a study of internal affairs investigations that both officers involved shooting and also all the rest of the internal affairs investigations. And what was reported to us at the time by the representative of internal affairs was that the then Chief Schultz, after consultation with Mr. Turek, the city attorney, Mr. Turek ruled that we did not have a right to that information, so we have never been able to pursue, although we tried to pursue it, we have never been able to pursue that authority in the ordinance. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, now back to public comment. So, again, thanking everyone for being here, and thank you for participating in this process. First things first, you must sign in with our staff. At that point, we'll call you up by name. You're going to be limited to 3. The rules read, members of the public are limited to 3 minutes unless modified at the discretion of the chair, and individuals who sign up for public comment may donate their time to another speaker. But any person to whom time has been donated will be limited to a total of 3 time allotments. I think we have a reasonable number of people here tonight, so we'll stick with the 3-minute time slot. Another thing to keep in mind, I think that the amount of people is reasonable, but the fire marshal will be here and keeping an eye on the building to enforce fire code issues. If there are capacity issues with the crowd, we may need to stop the meeting until we are in compliance. Lastly, anticipating some passionate discussion this evening. Emotions, strong feelings, all acceptable. What's not acceptable is going to be disrespecting other speakers and not allowing everybody the opportunity to be heard. Whether you agree or disagree, I would ask that you please refrain from making comments during someone else's allotted time. It's within your right to be critical. However, I would discourage name-calling, heckling, and rude behavior in general. If we're not able to maintain a level of decorum, I have the option of adjourning the meeting. So I would ask for everybody's assistance in keeping that going. With that said, the list of speakers begins with Ms. Montoya, followed by Mr. Ellis and Mr. Gomez. Ms. Montoya?
Hi, my name is Amalia Montoya. I live here in Albuquerque, and this is actually my ancestral grounds. My people have been here for as far back as oral history can go. I know there are many demands that have been made, and the community has come together and put these demands together. And one of the ones that I think, for me personally, that's most important is you all got the lapel cameras, but now we need to have them turned on, and we need to have those videos turned over so that it's public knowledge what is on them. I think that right now, Albuquerque has an opportunity to set an example across the country, because police brutality is not just here in Albuquerque, it's across this country, and it's problematic. So we have an opportunity to step up and show that we can make a change here in Albuquerque and be leaders in that area across the country. And I believe that the people here in Albuquerque have been coming to these meetings and the council meetings and have been in the streets and have been asking for change and pushing for change. And I think that we need to be really clear that the administration, from the governor to the mayor to the police chief, that is where the moral incompetence is. And that needs to be called out, and they need to be held accountable. For myself personally, I think it's important to make all the connections around police brutality. So today I'm here to say that I would like you to help make it so that not one more person here in Albuquerque, here in New Mexico, across this country, is shot down by any police department, any division of the militarized police. That not one more family is torn apart by ICE, which is police brutality. That not one more body is put up on that mesa. That not one more child is handcuffed in the schools and taken off in a police car. I think that if you're courageous, you can stand up and you can stand behind the not one more concept. So I would like you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Montoya. Next is Mr. Ellis, who had an additional 3 minutes donated to him.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, thank you. My name is Kenneth Ellis, and my son was an Iraq War veteran that was gunned down by APD on January 13, 2010. And what I've learned about the process since then is very disheartening. Not this particular panel, but the Police Oversight Commission and the process. I kept hearing independent review officer. There's nothing independent about what she does. What she does is what the administration tells her to do. The internal affairs of the police department is corrupt to the core. They have blood dripping off their hands. This police department and this administration, all the way to the Attorney General, have ownership in what's going on here. Actually, each and every one of us as individuals has ownership in what's going on here, because it's up to us to you know, keep our servants accountable. And thank you, Mr. Shine, Mr. Barker, Mr. Siegel. You guys are honestly trying to do the right thing, and reality is you're bound by your mayor, by our mayor, and by this administration. You know, it's very disheartening to hear the media report what the police have told them and what, you know, justify, the grand jury justified it. Malarkey, that's a bunch of malarkey. You know, it's all about public perception, and the process that we have here is a farce. You know, we have a corrupt rogue regime called Albuquerque Police Department, and you know, I don't want to generalize. We have some really good, honest, ethical, moral men and women on the police department, and I thank them from the bottom of my soul for the job they're trying to do. And I want to apologize to each and every one of them for their administration and their leadership, which has failed them, as it has failed the whole community. You know, just look at my son's case, for instance. The independent review officer at the time was retired federal judge Deaton, and he determined that my son's killing was not justified. And he presented that findings to the Police Oversight Commission at the time, and they disregarded what he said. You know, we had one man out of the whole system that said, hey, this wasn't justified, and nobody listened to him. So, you know, independent review officer, ain't nothing independent about it. Police Oversight Commission, no offense, ladies and gentlemen, but you're spinning your wheels, you're wasting your time. Unless this administration, unless this mayor, and unless these city attorneys and these leaders, these servants, unless they do the right thing and you know, do a 180 and somehow find some ethical, moral direction, which has obviously been lost. We're all, you know, we're all going to be looking at some more murders. I just came out of a meeting with the Department of Justice, and you know, there needs to be some indictments. Bottom line, there's some officers that are backshot individuals. And that's something that's been bothering me from the get-go. How do you shoot somebody in the back and justify that? It makes no sense to me whatsoever. Back in the day, you shot somebody in the back and you were hung by the rope, by the neck with a rope until you were dead. That's unforgivable, regardless. So, you know, and I keep hearing us and them, and who's against APD and who's for APD. You know what? We're all in the same game, just different levels. We're all dealing with the same hell, just different devils. So, you know, I feel like a broken record. Here I am again and again and again trying to, you know, here we are saying the same things time and time again. While we're speaking right now, the administration is up there on the 10th floor of the Hyatt building talking to DOJ about a consent decree and about, you know, the federal government going to sue this administration for their lack of leadership. You know, I just hope and pray that somehow or another we can get the mayor to wake up and take this bull by the horn and corral it. Let's make an example for the rest of the country. Let's make a system that's viable. You know, we've got a independent, we got a police oversight task force that you know, did some in-depth studying and looking at other task force or other police oversight commissions throughout the country, and they brought down a recommendation And I just really hope that this administration takes those recommendations to heart and implements each and every one of them without any kind of redacting or whatever you want to call it. Man, I just don't know what else to say other than we're all in this boat together, and it's going to take each and every one of us to make it right. And you know, if our I keep wanting to, you know, point the finger at the mayor because the buck stops with him. I mean, he has the final say in anything that goes on here. He's got the final say over the mayor or over the chief of police. You know, we got a district attorney that refuses to do her oath, do the right thing. I mean, it's just it's not just the police department. And it's not the police department as a whole. It's the leadership, and it's the ingrained. You know, what's going on is something that's been a problem that we've had for decades. So I thank you for your time. Is there any questions?
Mr. Ellis, thank you for your remarks. I would just point out, and I understand what your point of view is, but I would just point out, when you made reference to the fact that we are bound by the mayor, I, for one, am not bound by the mayor. I view myself as independent. But we are, however, bound by the current ordinance, which is, as I've indicated before, defective. For example, the IRO does not have a popular authority to independently investigate officer-involved shootings, and that's a major defect in the current ordinance. Right. But that's a problem that's got to be addressed by the City Council, and I think, as you know, the Justice Department, in its report that they issued today, has already indicated that there are serious defects with the current civilian oversight system, and it has to be fixed. And the primary fixer of that is going to have to be the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis.
Thank you.
Next up is Mr. Gomez, followed by Ms. Namasta, Ms. Lucero, and Ms. Grafis. Mr. Gomez, thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm just going to read some little paragraphs here about what we got here today at the DOJ conferences. Just kind of paraphrasing here. The Albuquerque Police Department has engaged in a pattern or practice of excessive force, including deadly force. The pattern and practice is the result of serious systematic deficiencies in policy, training, supervision, and accountability. The police department's failure to ensure that officers respect the Constitution undermines public trust. Constitutional policing increases the public's trust, ensures safety, and respects the rights of the city's residents. The Justice Department found reasonable cause to believe that the Albuquerque Police Department engages in a pattern or practice of excessive force in violation of the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. The Justice Department specifically found 3 patterns of excessive force. Officers too frequently use deadly force against people who pose a minimal threat in situations where the conduct of the officers heightens the danger and contributes to the need to use force. Encounters between Albuquerque police officers and persons with mental illness and in crisis too frequently result in a use of force or a higher level of force than necessary. And you know how the key word in there is? Force. Unreasonable, unlawful, and force. And some of the measures here, I'm not going to go through them all, but the very last one says community policing and oversight. That's some of the recommended measures. All right, and you folks are the oversight. And you folks can't do your job because the laws, the policies, whatever you want to call them, doesn't allow you to. So we're going to have to work with that, like you said, with the City Council, and get you guys some teeth, get you guys something to work with, you know. Because we know that, you know, most of you want to do the right thing, and you're just bound because, you know, you can't, because, you know, it's not in your titles to be able to do that. So that's what we got to work on. We got to work on from the bottom up to give you folks who want to do the right thing some power to do it. And that's what we're going to do. And we're going to keep strong with that. We're going to work with the DOJ with that. We're going to work with the council with that. So any questions? Well, you guys have a good evening.
Thanks, Mr. Gomez. Ms. Namasta. If I'm pronouncing that correctly.
No, it's fine. My name is Saida Namaste. I hope that you are as alarmed as I am at the Department of Justice report that came out a few hours ago that the Albuquerque Police Department does have a pattern in practice. It's not isolated, it's not sporadic, it's a pattern in practice of excessive use and deadly use in violation of our constitutional rights. Something a lot of us already knew, and hopefully you knew, but it's alarming that now you need to act. As Mr. Gomez pointed out, on page 45 of the report, it talks about revising your oversight commission. And I feel like every time I hear you all talk, it's always about how your hands are tied, and I don't believe it. I believe your hands are tied on some things, but you wouldn't be on this commission if there's nothing that you can do. Have you demanded the videos that the APD has of the shootings of all of the people, including Alfred Redwine 2 weeks ago? If you require the lapel cameras, if this commission was part of that requirement, why don't you have the videos and why haven't they been released? There are things this commission could be doing. I'd like to hear today what you're going to do in light of the DOJ. If you can't hear it from your own fellow community members to do something, maybe the DOJ will make you say that you're going to do something. I would like to hear today that you're going to do something. Last week I was in the park at UNM and my daughter was with me and riot police showed up. And she was so terrified. She was crying and hysterical. And I said to her, honey, the police aren't going to hurt us. And she said, Mom, didn't the police just kill more than 20 people? This is my little girl, you know? And so she knows that they're killing people. And people are afraid in this community, and you are an oversight body, and you could be doing something. So if you're going to continue to say that there's nothing that you can do, that it's all on city council, and you just have to talk to city council, are you talking to city council? Or are you depending on us to risk getting arrested? Are you depending on us to get tear gassed? Are you depending on us to be intimidated by police to get you guys to do something? Because that's what it seems like the last 2 weeks in the city. Is it took us, non-violently, 11 hours on the street before anybody was listening, really listening. But have we seen action yet? No, we don't see action. We see more meetings, more talk, more reports. We want action. It's good. So you need to do that. And if you can't, if you say your hands are tied and there's nothing you can do as a commission, you can't get stuff from the APD, you can't get stuff from these people that aren't independent, then I say you all resign. All of you resign if there's nothing you can do. So I have some questions for you. Do you have a take on the DOJ report? What are you going to do as an oversight commission? Are you meeting with city council? Why can't you have special meetings? What are you going to do? I would like to know that. And I think we all do. And everybody on live stream and everybody on TV wants to know, what are you going to do?
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Actually, I reconsidered opening it up. I'm going to let the public have their say, and then we can respond afterwards.
I think we ought to meet with
The next speaker is Laura Lucero.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to appeal the chair's decision. I'm continuing a common practice of permitting commissioners to make statements or ask questions after each person speaks.
There's a pretty wide audience here that would all like an opportunity to speak. We get to hear you speak every month.
I understand, Mr. Chair.
Like
I've appealed the decision. I've stated the reason I've appealed the decision, and I think that I have a right to have a vote of the commission on the appeal.
Make a motion.
Well, I don't have to make a motion. I stated an appeal. You have a right to make a statement as to why you're doing what you just did, and I would just take a vote.
Okay. So the motion is to allow the commissioners to respond. Okay. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed? Okay, it fails.
The public says yes.
Next speaker, Laura Lucero. Followed by Barbara Grafus, Maria Batista.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Lucero. I live in Albuquerque, and I also want to hear the answers to the questions from the previous speaker. So I hope at some point during this meeting, her questions will be addressed. I have a very specific question for you and for the investigation. I recently learned that there's a program, it's concerning the training of police and law enforcement. And I have witnessed myself at some of these meetings and some of these protests how the military aspect, the militarization of the police with their gear, with their attitude, since Occupy, actually 2010 and 11, has gotten more and more and more belligerent, even in the face of peaceful protesters. And this rings very true to my experience 9 months when I was living in Palestine. And I'll draw the connection because I learned 2 weeks ago that there's a program between Israel and the United States for training law enforcement. It's called LEAP, Law Enforcement Exchange Program. And it specifically talks in that manual about militarization and how to confront protesters. I saw when I lived in the Middle East how Israel was confronting the Palestinians in the West Bank, oftentimes with tear gas, sometimes with sewage water and other things, and I saw lethal force used. And so I'm wondering if APD has been participating in any of this kind of law enforcement program. I do know that a few years ago, the New Mexico, what's his position? The head of the state police was part of this LEAP program. He attended one of the programs, one of the training seminars here in the United States, I think 2010 or 11. So I'd like to know specifically from you, and if you can ask your staff or whoever, to find out whether APD is using LEAP and participating in the LEAP program. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Ms. Gratas, followed by Ms. Batista, and then Ernest Studevant.
My name is Barbara Grothus. I live downtown. I'm going to read to you from page 3 of the Department of Justice report, which says that the use of excessive force by APD officers is not isolated or sporadic. On page 29, it talks about internal affairs. It says, thus, in many cases, we found that the Internal Affairs Unit did not make recommendations to the chain of command where officers clearly violated policy despite its responsibility to identify personnel guilty of misconduct so that proper corrective action may be taken. We also found that the Internal Affairs Unit relies too heavily on interviews conducted in the initial shooting review. We reviewed a number of files where the Internal Affairs failed to re-interview civilian witnesses. The unit is thus deficient in carrying out one of its most basic duties. One of the other things that the report says is that most of the 20 shootings that the Department of Justice looked at, the Department of Justice found that excessive, unnecessary, unconstitutional force was used in most of the police shootings resulting in death. Do you understand why we are out here frustrated and angry at 3 people, especially here, who won't even allow people to have an answer to the questions they are asking about this? When you started, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Chair, with your statement about the last, the shooting that ignited the current sort of interest in what has happened, I just want to call your attention to the idea that the police chief reviewed that tape, found that it was a justified shooting, and released it because of that. What do the tapes, the videos look like that there is any other more egregious murder than that video showed? Why have we not seen any of those others? If this was seen as justified justifiable by a police culture that clearly is out of step in its understanding of how the world sees people shot. Now, this community is not going to stop with our presence at these kinds of meetings. We are going to continue to be here and hold you accountable because you can do some things, and we want those things done. This report, the New York Times this afternoon calls it scathing. I join with other people here in saying Albuquerque should be a leader in showing that we can take criticism and understand our role in it and step up to the plate and stop this kind of business in our town. Thank you.
Next up, Maria Batista, followed by Ernest Sturdivant, and then Mr. Arison following that.
I've been before you before. My name is Maria Bautista. I presented an appeal one time when you approved a complaint that I made, and the independent review officer recommended that you stand with the officers in that particular situation. I'd like to let the people here know today that are here for an appeal that you're very courageous. I want to say that the 20 complaints before you tonight, 98 to 99% will be exonerated, and that's almost unbelievable. That happens every month. The internal review officer protects the Albuquerque Police Department. It's in her best interest. Job security, and if she's unemployed, she could become homeless. And I don't wish that on you, Robin. Additionally, the Police Oversight Commission says, and I've been here before you were here, Mr. Peterson, says we can't do anything. That's not true. If you really want to be a great committee, stand up, step back, and say, we're not going to do any more of this until the administration decides how they're going to deal with the DOJ recommendations. You can do that. Granted, maybe they won't buy any services from you, but that's okay if you're really interested in what you're doing. Additionally, I came to you, and the only thing you could say to me was, we're sorry, Maria, it was a mistake. I appreciated that, but it forced me to look for another remedy. I could either sue the city of Albuquerque, or I could go to the Department of Justice, which is what I did, and that's why I'm here today. You forced me to go outside the system, and I want to tell you why. The officers who participated in my home invasion, although it didn't seem very bad to you, if you surround yourself with 4 officers, not being able to leave your home and having to say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, you'd understand what we felt. Those officers know my name, my address, what I do, where I come from, how old I am, who my partner is, and everything about my life. I only know them as Officer A, B, Q, M, and P. I'm going to fight with this community until the POC stands up and until our recommendations by the DOJ are followed. If I end up dead, let it be known here and today that that's okay.
Followed by Charles Arison and Rabai Wadwani.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Ernest Sturdivant. I know it's not the same as Baca. By now, you are all aware of what the POC has had to say about our community and about your part in our community and the broken part of your predecessors in our community. I need to highlight that this has been brought about only through the extensive and intense efforts of grassroots organizations that have been led by the families who've suffered loss to the public execution of their family members by APD. Let's call it what it is. It's public execution. Those people need to be acknowledged. As part of the reform of this group, it needs to maintain a deep and serious connection with grassroots organizations in this community. And I want to caution you, while we appreciate, just as we appreciate from the City Council, understanding statute and what your role is as part of statute, I have to remind you that you're also members of our community. And beyond that, that means that we all together need to participate in the healing of the failed institutions of our government that have allowed APD to run amok. We need the IRO removed from the process at the POC. It's a farce. It has been a farce. It continues to be a farce. We need accountability, whether you think you can do it or not. We, the people in Albuquerque, need accountability for our failed government institutions. From the top of the state, where the governor, who really appointed Chief Eden as Albuquerque's police chief, down to the mayor, the DA, the chief of police himself, and the IRO. We need accountability, and none of these people are capable, based on their past performance, of participating in solving these issues when they are fully culpable for the disease and the problems that exist in our community now. And finally, I must reiterate, we need release of all videos and of all public information regarding these officers. That means their education, their records in the department, and that kind of personal information that the Albuquerque Journal puts on the front page about James Boyd, but we never see the shooters, the killers in our community, held up to public scrutiny the way the public is. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Charles Arison, followed by Ravai Wadwani, Naira Gitana, and Desi Brown. Mr. Arison, welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I've been coming here since before any of you were on this commission. And to tell you the truth, I'm sorry I have to say this, you're no different from the other commissioners that were here before that just stymied everybody. There is something you can do. We had a mayor here, a few days ago in a press conference say he had never heard of the Lunar Walker report. A 2 decades old report that isn't much different than this that came from the DOJ today. We had a chief of police now that gave a press conference, and when asked if this shooting was justified, he said it was, without any investigation whatsoever. You can pass non-binding resolutions of no confidence in the mayor, in this chief of police, in the CAO, in the city attorney, right down the line. You can do that. You can go on the record with your sentiments as to the people in power, and really in power here, since you really are powerless. There's no doubt you are powerless. And we are going to change that, aren't we, Mr. Gomez? But like I said, you can pass non-binding resolutions, letting everybody know where you stand. Because right now, we don't. Are you with us, or are you not? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arison. Next is Ravai Wadwani. I'm sure I'm not doing that justice.
Thank you. I'm Ravi Wadwani. I live in the North Valley. I lived in Albuquerque for a few years and then went around the world a couple of times living in different places. And I think that gives me some perspective into why I'm here, which is I think that an out-of-control police officer is out of control with anybody. And any of us, Republican, Democrat, or anywhere, is at risk of being shot and killed by such. There are many good police officers in the force, but here we do have some police officers that are out of control, and that is a risk that brings me here. I have one main point to make and some perspective. I would like to thank you for your service, because after all, it is public service, and you are putting yourself out here at some risk, maybe even at risk of being shot if you cross the wrong people. This is what I've learned from my time in Albuquerque. I would like to thank you also for making eye contact with us. I've been to many city council meetings here where they don't even bother to look at you. Sometimes they're busy doing something, but the other times they're just not bothered to make eye contact. And I think that is important. And I also think it's important to show respect when it's a matter of life and death. To not chew gum or anything else. If I had done that with my grandmother, she would have grabbed me by the scruff of my neck and had given me a good talking to. And I think that's disrespectful. The main point I want to make is when a member of your family is shot and killed, and whether you're homeless or you're a person that the system has failed for whatever reason, because the system is not perfect, and some people do fall through the cracks. When that person is failed and then is shot because they're homeless or whatever, it is not enough to say, we'll reform the person that shot you. That person needs to be punished. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Next up is Mayura Gitana, followed by Desi Brown, and I believe Ms. Valerie. Sorry. Welcome.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nira Kitana. It is always bastardized some way or the other. I'm here because of Mr. Peterson's comments when he opened the meeting. I thought about it for a moment and I thought I have to respond to this because I am a risk taker. Moses was a risk taker. Where would we be without that? Jesus was a risk taker. Muhammad was a risk taker. Mahatma Gandhi was a risk taker. They broke the rules, all of them. Martin Luther King, he died because he was a risk taker. And so I'm here just in a short moment to tell you to take the risk. As other people have pointed out, whether you agree that you have power or no power, however that stands at the moment, you can write a letter. You can write a letter to the editor. You can write a letter to the mayor. You can write a letter to the chief of police. You can write a letter to the DOJ and say you support whatever they're doing here. There's something you can do that would still protect you as an individual, but you are members of this community. I was at lunch with a friend yesterday, and there were 5 businessmen walking down the street with briefcases, and we looked at each other and we thought, and we said actually, do you think the APD would stop these gentlemen and say, where's your ID? What do you have in that briefcase? Where have you been? Where are you going? How long will you be there? What's your name? What's your wife's name? What's your child's name? Where do you work? Where do you go to school? That would never happen. Never happen. And if it did, there would be 5 lawsuits filed that very afternoon. So keep in mind that there are class issues here that we are also dealing with. There's a class of people that many of you have never even seen in your life unless you go into the so-called districts where they are. So Albuquerque is suffering not only from the APD violence, but a systemic class issue that affects our social system, that affects our education system, that affects us across the board. You may be somewhat isolated from those statistics, but they're very real and they're very true. So once again, take the risk, write a letter.
Next up, Desi Brown.
Thank you, members of this commission. My name is Desi Brown. I'm a grad student at UNM and a part-time instructor in the Peace Studies program. And I'd like to apologize to Mr. Shine from my emotional outburst at the last subcommittee meeting. Mr. Shine's been in my classroom before, and I kind of reamed you guys a little bit. Sorry. But I might do it again tonight. I'd like to suggest that there's more that you can do than just write letters. There are people that have been coming to meetings like this for over 20 years, seeing very little in the way of results. They sit here and they talk, you guys listen. They sit here and talk, you guys listen. Might make a recommendation or something like that, and not a whole heck of a lot ever gets done. I think the public, as you guys have seen, is tired of trying to hold you accountable. They're tired of trying to hold the mayor accountable. They're tired of trying to hold the chief of the police accountable. They're tired of trying to hold the police officers accountable. I think it's time for you guys to hold yourselves accountable. I get it, you're a volunteer board. I get it that you're trying to do some good work in the community. Mr. Shine in particular, I know you're really trying to do some good work in this community. But the excuse that you guys have no authority doesn't cut it anymore. Writing letters to the editor doesn't cut it anymore. You guys need to be at every single city council meeting, and you need to be signed up, all 6 of you or all 7 of you who are on this committee, and you need to harass the city council until they do something. You need to be writing letters not to the editor, but to national news organizations and doing public speaking engagements showing how horrid this situation is. You guys need to look deep inside of your own personal morality and your own sense of community ethics and question your lack of action, which may well have resulted in the additional deaths of numerous community members since you've been on this board. Think about that. Think about that. There's plenty that you guys can do. Like several people in this audience have already said, you know, we're the ones who are out there on the streets trying to advocate for the kind of stuff that you guys actually do have some power to do. You know, you want to do something real? Go to this woman's office and lock yourself to her door until she's fired, or until her office is disbanded, or until the mayor's office rearranges it so that it actually is an independent review board instead of something out, you know, ensconced inside of APD. You guys have the power to stand up, and if you do, we'll back you. Until you do, we're going to be here demanding action, not asking for some simple, silly, stupid little resolution that you submit to somebody else. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, sorry I'm having trouble with this one. Hakeem Alari? Felony. Has anyone else signed up? Hakeem is here. Hakeem, welcome.
Hakeem Bellamy? Yes, thank you. Thank you, committee. My name's Hakeem Bellamy. I'm a 9-year resident of Albuquerque, New Mexico, originally from Philadelphia in the South Jersey area. And I'm here to speak personally and then a little bit organizationally, and I'll try to do it under 3 minutes. So, as an African American male in this country, personally, I have to admit that when this whole thing kind of blew up, I was a little bit desensitized to it. Honestly, I was like, this has happened to people of color, especially black males, for a long time, and now everyone's excited about it. So I'm just going to be honest about that. What changed it for me was when I saw people starting to go into these camps of us versus them, like Mr. Ellis said earlier. It changed it for me when I started seeing people with their right to protest being turned into the enemy. And at that moment, I said, this is not going to build anything. This is not going to be constructive in any way until we start to feel like we're all in this together and we're trying to build something together. So that's how I come to this particular issue as it stands right now. Today, I'm representing an organization that I work for and proud of. And we have started a kind of community grassroots movement to gather stories from people who aren't on polarized opposites of the debate. And we want people to talk about their vision for what they want to build. We all have our opinions on what is wrong, but what are we going to replace that with? And so I want to invite you, and I want to invite everybody in here today to join Protect and Serve ABQ in telling your story. And we're gathering 30-second, minute-long stories, 3-minute, if it needs to be that long, stories from people saying, what do you want? What do you want when an officer comes to your door? And conversely, from the officers and people who are on that side, if you will, of the argument, what does the community need to do to help us work together to build something that's going to really help us and our children moving forward? So I have my colleagues here. Summer Smith is here. Michael Lopez is outside with the camera. I welcome everybody on your way out just to give us 30 seconds and say what you want. If you could talk to an officer, or the other side of an officer could talk to the community, because we want both. We want both perspectives on what we can do to work together, because in my opinion, I'm a media professional. I've done that. That's my training. I'm finishing my master's of communications at UNM. What the mainstream media is doing is woefully inadequate for the discussion that we need to have as a community to really build what we want to build. And we want to work with you, and we want to work with them to have people tell their stories and to have other people tell the stories for us, because if you can see, we've been really entertaining in Washington and New York, and that's great for news and ratings, but what are we going to do to actually solve the problem here? So we invite you all to do that and visit us on Facebook and Twitter. Twitter is @PSABQ, and on Facebook is Protect and Serve ABQ. You don't have to do your stories now. You can upload it yourselves and send it from your laptop. And I don't know what you guys are allowed to do. You might be under a gag order and not be able to speak, but I'd love to hear your ideas as individuals on what you think Protect and Serve should look like in Albuquerque. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Kenneth Grant, followed by Tina Catchell. Real quick, I would just say if there's anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak, if you come up front and sign in. Welcome, sir.
Hi, my name is Kenneth Grant. I'm a retired physician in Albuquerque. I spent the afternoon this afternoon with a very difficult read for me. I read the DOJ's 46-page report, which was just extremely shocking. It was just page after page after page after page of our police department behaving in ways that the DOJ characterized as unreasonable force, causing serious injury to 12 individuals and death to 6 individuals. This was over the period they looked at from February 09 to September 2012, so they didn't look at more recent cases, or I guess cases prior to that. But one of their main findings, as well as using their firearms when they shouldn't be using them, is the use of the tasers. That 11 out of 12 cases they found where there was unreasonable use of force with tasers. I mean, 11 out of 12 of the unreasonable force cases was use of tasers. They said that they were using them inappropriately. They were shocking people too many times. And the way they used them, they said that you cannot characterize the tasers as non-lethal weapons. The way they were being used was what they characterized as intermediate lethality. Because the way they were being used, they can cause death with some frequency. Fortunately, none of the people who were tased in the group that they looked at where they thought there was unreasonable force actually died. Although one gentleman had apparently mentally ill, had soaked himself in gasoline, and when they tased him, it set him on fire. He apparently survived. Another man was so developmentally disabled that he was unable to speak. He was unable to understand what they were saying, but they repeatedly tased him, and they also shot him with those bean bags, and they shot him with wooden batons, 4 wooden batons, and they attacked him with a police dog before. There's a apparently subdued. And in addition to this, there was also 6 killings that other people have discussed. Andrew Lopez, Donnie Smith, Alan Gomez, Ken Phillips III, Daniel Tillotson, and Mickey Owens, all of which they said were unjustified killings, and they basically accused the APD of murder. I'm not an attorney, but just reading what they said is murder or manslaughter. So I think this needs to be looked into.
Thank you, sir. The last speaker signed up to speak is Tina Ketchell. Welcome.
Well, my name is Tina Michelle. I live in Midtown Albuquerque. I first want to say that I'm here with great humility. I have been learning and watching in great admiration for the community organizers and activists that have been researching, advocating for, and trying to communicate with you all in the city and the police department for decades. I'm not one of those people. I've been learning, and I invite you to really learn with me. I'm asking you to really hear your community. In 3 minutes, I'm going to try to make a few points. In the last 2 weeks, as people have been in the street, there's been a lot of criticism for minor acts of what we could call vandalism. For example, after 5 hours of testimony, to which the city council had, aside from one counselor, no response, some substations were sprayed with paint. I would ask you to open your minds and see this not as an act of violence, but as an act of frustration, as an act of street theater to get attention to this problem, because all the other ways have not worked. I'm asking you, I believe that the first way to change is to change how you think about something. So change how you think, or open your mind if it's not already, and see this in a new light. Stand with your community that's speaking and tired of mere words. We heard this morning, I listened to the Department of Justice. I was working and listened to the press conference. I listened to part of the mayor's response, and we heard a lot of, we want to talk to the community. The community has been talking with you all for decades. What's going to happen now? I was at, I'll admit, my first meeting of this council, this commission, 2 weeks ago, I think. The smaller community, the smaller body, right? With all respect, Commissioner Siegel, you told us we should be happy we live in a country where we can be free to assemble and come and speak in a situation like that. We're not free to assemble and speak our minds. I was there for part of those 12 hours. There was no freedom that night to express ourselves. That day of the 12-hour protest, there was military might to silence us. Thank you.
Okay, when I said earlier that I wasn't going to allow the commissioners to respond, I didn't mean that they wouldn't have an opportunity to respond. I just wanted our visitors to have a chance to speak. So with that being said, I'd like to make a quick statement, then I'm going to allow the commissioners to say something. I'd ask that they do their best to keep it brief. One of the speakers commented on us making eye contact and paying attention. Speaking for myself, listening to you, and I get what you said this evening. Hearing people from our community come up here and speak is one of the best parts of this job. I would apologize for others if you see someone playing with their phone or something like that. I mean, that's disrespectful, and I am honored to be able to hear your take on things, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. We're obviously not able to respond to every question, and with that, I would like to open it up to the other commissioners to Commissioner Siegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I jotted a few notes as different of you spoke and listened intently. To Ms. Ketchel, the last speaker, I thank you for reminding us that we are here to hear our community. I would hope that you understood that I was absolutely